This is the Holy Land Timeline, bringing the Bible to life from the Holy Land.
Walking the ground where history meets faith. You're listening to the Holy Land Path on the Holy Land Timeline. Here are your hosts, Ethan and Sarah.
Right now, water levels in the Sea of Galilee are dropping.
Right.
And as the waters recede, they are basically exposing these massive 2,000-year-old commercial harbors. We're talking heavy stone breakwaters and, intricate piers that no human has laid eyes on for millennia. So the stones are crying out from the depths of the lake.
They really are. I mean, it is an absolutely unparalleled moment for historical geography and for biblical archaeology as a whole.
Yeah, for sure.
We are essentially witnessing nature itself peel back the water column, and it's revealing the sheer industrial scale of the first century.
Which is exactly why we are dedicating this deep dive to unearthing the tangible physical world of the first century Gospels. Our mission today is to kind of pull the lens back from the ethereal, maybe slightly romanticized Sunday school flannel graphs that we all grew up with.
Oh, definitely. The flannel graphs they don't quite capture it.
Right. They don't. And we want to step into the gritty, highly organized reality of the ancient Middle East. And to do that, we have compiled an incredible stack of sources for you today.
We really have some amazing stuff in here.
We're looking at cutting-edge archaeological reports from the El-Araj excavation project, and that includes some really fascinating press releases from the Center for the Study of Ancient Judaism and Christian Origins.
Yeah, those just came out, right?
Exactly. Plus, we've got environmental science and limnology, which, by the way, is the study of inland waters, coming to us from research detailed in the Jerusalem Post.
Right.
And finally, we're pulling from some heavy-hitting historical geography analysis from Table Talk Magazine and Biblical Archaeology Review.
The intersection of all these disciplines is what makes this so compelling. Because we are taking these deeply theological texts and we're grounding them entirely in dirt, in stone, economics, and, like you said, environmental science.
Yeah, it's so tangible. But so before we look at these ancient ports literally rising out of the mud, we need to completely reset our mental image of first century Galilee.
We do. We really do.
Because I think the common misconception is that this region was just a quiet, dusty, forgotten backwater of the Roman Empire, like a place where a few isolated peasants lived a subsistence lifestyle.
Right, the whole humble peasant narrative.
Exactly. But the sources we're looking at paint a drastically different picture, don't they?
They really do. The reality is almost the exact opposite of that quiet backwater image. I mean, the Galilee, and specifically the area rinking the Sea of Galilee, or Lake Kinneret as it's known locally, it was a thriving, densely populated, and just highly active commercial hub.
Okay, so a commercial hub, but it was still a distinctly Jewish area.
Yes, exactly. It was very much a Jewish enclave.
Yeah.
And what that means is you didn't find the heavy Greco-Roman pagan influences there that you'd find in, say, a place like Caesarea Maritima over on the coast.
Right, so no massive temples to Roman gods.
Exactly. You didn't find sprawling temples to Augustus in these fishing villages. Instead, you found synagogues, kosher food markets, and those big stone vessels used for ritual purity. But, and this is key, we cannot mistake that cultural distinctiveness for, economic isolation.
Because they were actually deeply plugged into the broader world.
Highly plugged in. I mean, the lake itself was a massive economic engine. It was basically the center of a booming export industry that connected these local Jewish fishermen directly to the broader Mediterranean economy.
Wow.
Yeah, we are talking about a place of intense hard labor, complex commerce, and just constant daily interaction. News traveled fast here. People from dozens of different villages interacted daily out on the water and in the markets.
Okay, so let's unpack the scale of that commerce, because I think it fundamentally changes how we understand the men who actually walked away from it.
It absolutely does.
Because, to understand the fishermen who left their nets to follow a new teacher, we have to understand the sheer size and the value of the nets they were leaving.
Right, the economic sacrifice.
Yes. We have to move into the industrial reality of the Sea of Galilee. And this brings us back to those stones crying out from the depths. Because the receding waters have revealed something that basically challenges all our casual assumptions about this era.
The scale is truly staggering. You see, during the first century, the water level of the Sea of Galilee was actually lower than its average level for most of our modern era.
Wait, really? Lower than today?
Well, lower than the modern average, yeah. And because of recent prolonged droughts, plus some fluctuations in the region's water management, the lake has dropped right back down to those ancient levels.
Oh, wow. So it's basically revealing the ancient shoreline.
Exactly. And in doing so, surveyors have mapped out at least 16 distinct ancient ports along the shores of this single lake.
Hold on. 16 massive ports on a lake that is, what, only about 13 miles long and 8 miles wide?
Yeah.
That is an incredibly dense concentration of maritime infrastructure.
It is. It implies a highly structured maritime economy. I mean, we have to picture the waters absolutely bustling with hundreds, perhaps even thousands of boats at any given time.
Which completely shatters the lonely rowboat image.
Completely.
Yeah.
And the crown jewel of this infrastructure, the real operational headquarters of Jesus' ministry, was the city of Capernaum.
Right, Capernaum. We read about Capernaum constantly in the Gospels. You know, Mark, Matthew, Luke, they all highlight Capernaum as the home base.
They do.
But the archaeology reveals that Capernaum wasn't just a place to, like, park a rowboat on a muddy bank. The sources detail a 2,500-foot promenade built right along the water.
Yes.
I mean, that is nearly half a mile of continuously paved, engineered waterfront.
It's unbelievable. And it was fortified by an 8-foot-wide seawall with stone piers extending like 100 feet straight out into the deep water of the lake.
So, okay, let's just pause on that. The sheer volume of basalt stone, the complex engineering, and just the sheer capital required to build a 2,500-foot promenade and an 8-foot seawall is immense.
Immense. You don't build that for a few guys catching dinner, right?
Yeah,
You
excellent.
build that to accommodate serious commercial traffic. Capernaum was a major economic hub. I mean, imagine the noise. You got boats constantly coming in and out, the shouting of laborers loading and unloading heavy cargo, the hammering from the maintenance of all those wooden vessels.
It must have been chaotic.
Oh, totally. It would have smelled strongly of raw fish, hot tar, and sweat. It was basically the ancient equivalent of a bustling, modern, commercial marina.
Okay, so here is where I really want to reframe the picture for anyone listening. When we picture the apostles, you know, Peter, Andrew, James, John, we usually imagine a couple of guys in a lonely, leaky wooden boat, casting a little net over the side, basically living hand-to-mouth as humble peasants.
Right, the classic imagery.
Yeah. But based on a half-mile promenade and 16 active ports, how does a humble fisherman fit into this highly organized local economy? Were they actually destitute?
Well, see, calling them humble fishermen might be accurate if we were comparing their social standing to, say, the Jerusalem priestly elite or the Roman nobility living in palaces.
Sure, compared to Caesar, they were humble.
Exactly.
Sure.
But it's a massive historical error to assume that meant they were poor, uneducated, or unskilled. They were businessmen.
Businessmen.
Yeah, they were small business owners operating within a very sophisticated industry. And the archaeological artifacts that are being uncovered in this region give us a very clear, really mechanical picture of what their daily lives actually entailed. I mean, excavators are finding lead weights, literally hundreds and hundreds of them.
And these lead weights aren't small, right? They were meticulously attached to the bottoms of massive dragnets.
Right, the dragnets. And the mechanics of these dragnets are just fascinating. A proper dragnet or a seine net could be hundreds of feet long.
Hundreds of feet.
Hundreds. You would have cork floats along the top edge to keep it suspended at the surface, and then those heavy lead weights along the bottom edge to pull it down to the lake floor.
Okay, so it creates like a wall.
Exactly. It effectively creates an inescapable vertical wall in the water. But pulling a net of that size, especially when it is full of hundreds of pounds of fish, requires serious, coordinated effort.
I mean, you can't do that alone.
No way.
Yeah.
You needed a team of men. And often you needed multiple boats working in tandem to drag the net in a wide arc before, hauling it ashore or pulling it up between the vessels.
So they were managing serious capital equipment.
Absolutely.
I mean, to own a boat, to purchase the massive amounts of lead and iron required, to buy the raw materials for the nets that requires significant upfront investment.
And constant maintenance, too.
Right. Which brings up the needles. We also see specialized bone and bronze needles found at these sites, which were used specifically for the constant, grueling labor of mending these nets.
Yes, the mending. And we actually have a stunning visual representation of this daily labor.
Oh, the seal from Bethsaida.
Yes. During the excavations at Bethsaida, archaeologists found this fascinating ancient seal. It's a small carving, but it vividly depicts two men working together.
And what exactly does it show?
They're shown casting a large net from a flat-bottomed boat, which features a very distinct horse-shaped prow.
A horse-shaped prow.
Yeah, and right next to the boat in the carving, There is a marsh reed, which is identical to the papyrus reeds that still grow where the Jordan River enters the lake today, and a large fish.
So it's basically a snapshot.
It acts exactly like a first-century photograph of their daily reality. It corroborates the textual accounts perfectly. I mean, the Gospels specifically mention the sons of Zebedee having hired men working for their father's fishing business.
Oh, right, hired men. So they were employing laborers in a highly lucrative market.
Precisely.
But, that market didn't just stop at pulling the fish out of the water. And this is a crucial logistical point that I think we missed today. Fish rot incredibly quickly.
Oh, instantly.
Especially in the sweltering heat of the Middle East. If you pull thousands of pounds of fish out of the lake, you have a very, very short window before your entire catch is totally worthless.
Exactly. You can't just leave it sitting around.
Right. So there had to be a whole secondary industrial-scale infrastructure surrounding the fishermen to actually process the catch.
Yeah, we really have to zoom out and look at the broader regional economy to see how this functioned. If you travel just a bit south along the western shore from Capernaum, you hit the city of Magdala.
Magdala.
Right. In Greek, it was known as Tarikiae. And the name Tarikiae literally translates to the place of salted fish.
Unbelievable.
And its Hebrew name, Migdal-Nunia, means fish tower.
So they weren't exactly hiding their primary exports, like welcome to salted fish.
Yeah, exactly. The historian Flavius Josephus, writing in the 1st century, he tells us Magdala was a massive fortified city. It boasted a population of around 40,000 people.
But 40,000, that's huge for that time.
It is. It had defensive walls, gates, a hippodrome for races, and bathhouses. But the true economic engine of the city was fish processing. The fishermen in Capernaum and Bethsaida would catch the fish in massive quantities, and then those would be quickly transported down the coast to Magdala.
Okay, so what does that processing actually look like on an industrial scale? Because we're not talking about a couple of guys with a smoker in their backyard.
No, not at all. It basically relies on the chemical process of osmosis.
Osmosis, okay.
Workers would clean the fish and pack them into these massive vats, layered with heavy, heavy salt. The salt draws the moisture out of the fish's flesh, completely dehydrating it, while simultaneously creating an inhospitable environment for the bacteria that causes rotting.
So it cures the meat.
Right. Once the fish were fully cured, they were packed into specialized ceramic jars. And this salting process is the magic key that unlocked the global market for them.
Because now it can travel.
Exactly. It allowed Galilean fish to be exported all over the Roman Empire, traveling for weeks on carts and ships without spoiling. The Roman world had a massive appetite for preserved fish and fermented fish sauces like garum.
Garum, right, that famous Roman fish sauce.
Yeah, Magdala was feeding that demand.
The interconnectedness of this industrial machine is just staggering. I mean, you have the raw harvesters up in Capernaum and Bethsaida, the processing plants down in Magdala, and then the trade routes extending out to the entire Mediterranean.
It was a massive network.
So when we read the accounts of these fishermen being called to leave their nets, they aren't just, dropping a casual weekend hobby.
No, not at all.
They are walking away from a highly structured, profitable, and very secure economic system. They are leaving the 2,500-foot promenade. They are leaving the family business in a booming export economy. That requires an immense, almost unfathomable level of conviction.
The psychological weight of that decision is profound, honestly. I mean, they traded undeniable economic security for an itinerant lifestyle, following a teacher who famously said he had no place to lay his head.
Yeah. Wow. Well, having established the sheer physical effort and the massive infrastructure required to fish the Galilee, we need to examine what happens when the natural world, this environment the fishermen knew so intimately, behaves in an unnatural or, seemingly miraculous way.
Right.
Because the Gospels don't just record mundane fishing trips. They detail these mind-bending, net-breaking catches of fish that completely overwhelm these seasoned professionals.
They do. And there are two highly specific instances of this recorded in the texts. One early in the ministry and one post-resurrection.
And the pattern is pretty much identical in both, isn't it?
It is identical. The fishermen have been toiling all night long, utilizing all their expertise, all their expensive gear, and catching absolutely nothing.
It's just frustrating enough.
Right. Then they're instructed to cast their nets one more time in a specific spot, and suddenly the nets are overflowing to the point of breaking, requiring multiple boats just to keep from sinking under the sheer weight of the catch.
Okay, so this is where the deep dive takes a really fascinating turn into environmental science. because modern scientists, specifically physical limnologists who study the physics, chemistry, and biology of inland lakes, they have been extensively researching natural fish die-offs in Lake Kinneret.
Yes.
And their published findings read exactly like the biblical account.
It's incredible. And the research methodology was just brilliant. The scientists deployed temperature sensors and oxygen measuring devices deep into the water column of the lake. They tracked wind speeds, and they analyzed recent historical events alongside the ancient topography.
And what did they find?
Well, they mapped out the fact that Lake Kinneret is a thermally stratified lake.
Okay, so for you listening, thermal stratification essentially means the lake separates into distinct, unmixed layers based on water density and temperature.
Yes, exactly. The mechanics of it dictate that for most of the year, there is a cold, dense, lower layer of water that just sits at the bottom of the lake.
Like cold syrup at the bottom of a glass.
Good analogy, yeah. And because it doesn't mix with the surface air, it is severely depleted of oxygen.
Okay.
Sitting on top of that dense, cold layer is a warmer, lighter upper layer of water. Because this top layer interacts with the atmosphere and supports algae that photosynthesize, it is rich in oxygen. So naturally, the entire fish population spends its time in this upper oxygen-rich layer.
Because if they go too deep, they can't breathe.
Right. But the scientists found that during specific times of the year, primarily in the late spring and early summer, a highly unusual physical disruption occurs.
This is the upwelling phenomenon.
Yes.
How exactly does the wind trigger this upwelling? Because it sounds almost violent.
It is. It requires a very specific combination of forces. Strong western winds sweep across the surface of the lake, and the friction of the wind literally drags the top layer of warm surface water away from the western shore, pushing it eastward.
Okay, so the top layer is moving away.
Right. But because water must displace water, that cold, heavy, oxygen-depleted water from the depths is pulled violently up to the surface along the western shore to replace the water being blown away.
Wow.
This is the upwelling. The sudden influx of bottom water temporarily leaves almost zero oxygen in the upper levels of the water column along that specific coastline.
So the biology of that is brutal. It essentially suffocates that section of the lake in an instant.
It triggers mass asphyxiation. The sudden lack of oxygen causes thousands, sometimes tens of thousands, of fish to suddenly die or become completely stunned and immobile.
I just shut down.
Yeah. Their swim bladders lose regulation, and they simply float right up to the surface of the lake.
Wow.
So to anyone standing on the shore or sitting in a boat, it wouldn't look like a scene of mass death.
Right, because they're just bobbing there.
Exactly. It would look like a sudden, miraculous abundance of fish slowly rising to the surface, completely docile and incredibly easy to simply scoop up into a net.
And this isn't just a theoretical computer model. The researchers documented this exact phenomenon occurring in May and June of 2012.
They did.
It happened in April of 2007, and there were massive recorded events in the early 1990s as well. But the truly staggering part of the data is where these modern upwelling events happen.
Yes, the location.
The limnologists note that due to the specific underwater topography of the lake and the funneling of the wind patterns through the surrounding hills, these die-offs consistently occur at the exact same geographic location, right along the northwestern shore near a small bay area called Tubga.
And the location of Tubga is the critical data point here, because for thousands of years, Tubga has been the traditional historical site venerated by early Christians as the exact location where the miraculous catch occurred.
It's also the traditional site of the multiplication of the loaves and fishes, right?
Exactly. The modern scientific data perfectly maps onto the ancient geographic and temporal claims of the text.
I mean, it's perfect. The events happen in the late spring, right around the time of the Passover and biblical timelines, and they happen in the precise bay where the ancient churches were built to commemorate the miracles.
Right.
But, this brings up a profound philosophical question.
Sure.
If a team of physical limnologists can point to a completely natural mechanism, thermal stratification and wind-driven upwelling, does that debunk the miracle? Does saying, oh, it was just the wind mixing the water layers, remove the divine element, or does it actually prove the historical accuracy of the text?
That is the question, isn't it? It strikes at the core of how we view the intersection of faith and the physical mechanics of the natural world. Many historians and theologians argue that this environmental data provides profound physical confirmation of the Gospels.
Physical confirmation, I love that term.
Right. The biblical author isn't describing some mythical, magical event happening in a fairy tale land with dragons and wizards. They're describing a highly localized reality that perfectly aligns with the unique natural ecology of Lake Kinneret.
It really grounds the text in the dirt and the water. I mean, the author isn't inventing how the lake behaves. They are recording an eyewitness reality.
Absolutely. And from a theological perspective, it suggests a creator who is intimately, deeply involved with the physical mechanics of his own creation.
Yeah.
The ancient mindset didn't view miracles solely as a violation of the laws of physics. They view them as the perfect providential timing of those laws.
The timing is everything.
Yes, the wind blew at the exact necessary moment with the exact necessary force to trigger an upwelling in the exact location to provide a staggering abundance of food for his followers, right when the nets were cast after a night of failure.
Wow.
It validates the historical memory of the event while offering a tangible mechanism for how it physically manifested. Basically, the physical world is actively participating in the divine narrative.
The physical world participating in the narrative, that is a beautiful way to frame it. The timing is the miracle. The wind and the water obey the call, and it just reminds us that these were real men, sweating in real boats, hauling lead-weighted nets on a lake that still behaves today the exact same way it behaved 2,000 years ago.
Exactly the same.
But this brings us to another great mystery. We know how they fished, we know the immense scale of the ports they operated from, and we know the unique environmental physics of the lake they fished in.
Right.
But where did these specific men, Peter, Andrew, and Philip, actually lay their heads at night? Where did they live? This question introduces us to one of the most fiercely debated archaeological mysteries of the last century. We are hunting for the lost city of Bethsaida.
Ah, yes. The Hunt for Bethsaida is a classic historical detective story.
Okay, so let's set the parameters of the mystery for everyone. The name Bethsaida literally translates from Aramaic as the house of the fishermen or the house of hunting. And its importance in the biblical narrative really cannot be overstated. I mean, outside of Jerusalem and Capernaum, Bethsaida is one of the most frequently mentioned cities in the entire New Testament.
It is.
It is explicitly named as the hometown of the apostles Peter, Andrew, and Philip. It's the location where Jesus is recorded healing a blind man. It's the immediate area where the feeding of the 5,000 took place.
It's central to the story.
Very central. But ominously, it is also one of the cities, along with Capernaum and Chorazin, that Jesus explicitly curses for its unbelief and refusal to repent. He literally says, "Woe to you, Bethsaida."
Right.
And historically speaking, it seems that curse took hold with devastating literalness because for centuries, the city completely vanished from the map.
It really was swallowed by history. I mean, by the Middle Ages, no one had any idea where the house of the fishermen actually was located. And for the last few decades, the archaeological world has been locked in a fierce, sometimes really contentious debate over its true location.
Yeah, archaeologists take this very seriously.
Oh, they do.
Yeah.
For a long time, the dominant theory, the accepted academic consensus, was that a site called Et-Tell was the biblical Bethsaida.
Okay, Et-Tell.
Yeah.
So excavators have been digging at the Et-Tell site since the late 1980s, I think.
That's right.
And to be fair, they found some incredibly compelling material there. I mean, they dug down and found a major fortified Roman city. They found residential quarters featuring houses built from local basalt stone. They uncovered a substantial wine cellar.
All good indicators of a wealthy settlement.
Exactly. And crucially, they found a significant amount of fishing tools. Lead weights, iron anchors, fish hooks, the works. So on paper, if you read the early reports, it sounds conclusive. They found a Roman-era town with fishing gear. Case closed, right?
Well, the artifacts at Et-Tell are genuinely impressive. But the Et-Tell hypothesis runs into a massive, glaring logistical problem the very moment you look at a topographical map of the
The
region.
map ruins everything.
It really does.
Yeah.
Because the site of Et-Tell is located over a mile away from the current shoreline of the Sea of Galilee.
And this is where basic human logistics just dismantle the theory. How in the world can the House of the Fishermen, a town whose entire economy, identity, and namesake are based on pulling heavy nets out of the water, be a 30-minute walk inland?
It makes no sense.
Right. If you are a first-century laborer hauling massive drag nets, heavy lead weights, iron anchors, and hundreds of pounds of raw fish, you are not carrying all of that a mile uphill every single day after a grueling night on the water. That makes absolutely zero logistical or economic sense.
Exactly. The geographic reality of the site has always been a massive vulnerability for the Et-Tell hypothesis. Now, the defenders of Et-Tell are serious scholars, and they rely heavily on a geological defense to explain this huge discrepancy.
Okay, so what's their defense?
They argue that over the last 2,000 years, the landscape radically transformed. They point to a combination of seismic activity in the Great Rift Valley, general water recession, and massive sedimentation caused by the flash flooding of the Jordan River.
So all that silt building up?
Right. Their argument is that these forces essentially pushed the shoreline a mile away, effectively stranding the ancient port city inland over the centuries.
So the argument is basically the lake shrank and the land expanded, leaving the boats high and dry.
That's the idea. And for a while, simply because there were no better alternatives being excavated, the academic community largely accepted that somewhat strange geological explanation. But then, an entirely new contender entered the arena, and it has forced a complete reevaluation of the region.
Enter the site of El-Araj.
Yes, for years, historical geographers like Mendel Nunn, who was a famous Sea of Galilee researcher, argued that El-Araj was a much more promising candidate based on surface surveys.
Right? Surface surveys, just looking at what's on the ground.
Exactly. But it wasn't formally excavated until 2016 when a team led by Dr. Stephen Notley and Dr. Mordecai Avium broke ground. And the very first thing that makes El-Araj infinitely more compelling is its geography.
It's right on the water.
It sits right on the lakeshore. It is exactly where a fishing village needs to be to function.
Location is everything in real estate, even ancient real estate. So what have Notley and Avium actually found in the dirt at El-Araj that challenges the entrenched Et-Tell consensus?
Well, they found the precise stratigraphic layers required to prove a first-century occupation.
Stratigraphy being the layers of dirt and history.
Right. When they carefully dug down to the Roman layer, which is the first century, they found the unmistakable remains of a thriving Jewish fishing village. They found the requisite fishing weights, the domestic pottery, and the limestone vessels that indicate a Jewish population adhering to ritual purity laws.
Okay, so it checks the first century Jewish fishing village box.
Yes, but they also found evidence of a major civic transformation. We know from the first century historian Flavius Josephus that in the year 30 CE, the local ruler, Herod Philip, took the humble village of Bethsaida, elevated its political status to a Roman polis, a proper city, and renamed it Julius, after the Roman Emperor Augustus's daughter.
Now, elevating a village to a polis is a massive deal.
Huge deal.
It means new tax structures, new civic buildings, a complete change in local governance. It went from a rural fishing enclave to an urbanized Roman center, right around the exact time Jesus is beginning his public ministry in the region.
And the archaeology at El-Araj perfectly mirrors that historical text.
Yeah.
I mean, the excavators found coins from the years 29 and 30 CE, minted specifically by Herod Philip to commemorate the founding of the polis.
That is such a specific find.
It is. They also found evidence of a Roman bathhouse, which is an absolute hallmark of urbanization. The physical evidence perfectly matches the historical timeline of a fishing village transformed into a polis right on the water's edge.
Okay, the coins in the bathhouse are incredible finds, but archaeology is rarely just about finding the oldest layer of dirt, right?
Right.
It's also about tracing how a specific patch of ground was remembered and venerated through the centuries. So how do archaeologists confidently declare that El-Araj is a true Bethsaida and not just, another random unnamed fishing port? They have to look for the breadcrumbs left by the earliest Christians. They look for the architecture of memory.
Architecture of memory.
Yeah.
That's exactly it. The ultimate indicator in biblical archaeology is the presence of a Byzantine church.
Right.
If an event or location was deeply important to the first century followers of Jesus, by the 4th, 5th, and 6th centuries, the Byzantine Christians would inevitably construct a massive, beautiful church right on top of it to enshrine the memory in stone.
And we have a remarkable historical document that serves as a literal treasure map for this exact spot.
We do.
In the year 724 CE, a Bavarian bishop named Willibald went on a sprawling pilgrimage to the Holy Land. He kept a detailed travelogue of his journey, and he explicitly writes that he walked from the town of Capernaum to the town of Cursi. He meets that along the way, he spent the night at a place called Bethsaida, and he specifically records that a beautiful church stood there, built directly over the ancient home of the apostles Peter and Andrew.
Willibald's travelogue is the linchpin. He is an eyewitness to the geography of the 8th century. So the excavators at El-Araj knew exactly what they were looking for. If El-Araj is truly Bethsaida, there must be a massive church buried in the dirt.
And did they find it?
Oh, they did. In 2019, they uncovered a vast, beautifully preserved mosaic floor. And as they expanded the excavation grid, they realized they had found the footprint of a massive Byzantine basilica measuring 27 by 16 meters.
Wow.
It was located exactly where Bishop Willibald said it would be, right on the path between Capernaum and Cursi.
But the excavation of this basilica, which they designated the Church of the Apostles, revealed a truly bizarre architectural puzzle.
Oh, this is the weirdest part.
Right. As they cleared the centuries of dirt and debris, they found that the outer walls of the church were perfectly preserved to a height of about 1 meter all the way around the perimeter. But there were no doors, no entryways, no thresholds at all. It was like a solid, impenetrable stone box. So how do you construct a massive, ornate basilica for public worship with no doors?
It is one of the great mysteries of the site, honestly. And the archaeologists have proposed 2 leading theories to explain it.
Okay, let's hear them.
The first theory involves the Middle Ages. Long after the Byzantine period, during the Crusader or Mamluk eras, the region was heavily utilized for sugar production.
Sugar production.
Right, and processing sugarcane requires massive vats and really solid foundations. It's entirely possible that medieval workers decided to build a sugar factory directly over the ruins of the Byzantine church, using the sturdy existing lower walls as a ready-made foundation.
Okay, that makes practical sense.
Yeah. They wouldn't have cared about the intricate religious mosaics below, so they simply filled the interior of the ruined church with packed dirt to create a level working floor. And in doing so, they inadvertently sealed and preserved the church beneath a protective layer of earth, basically like a time capsule.
The idea of a medieval sugar factory blindly preserving one of the most important sites in Christian history is just incredible. The mundane preserving the sacred.
It really is.
So what's the second theory for the missing doors?
The second theory suggests a much more intentional act of preservation. We know from geological records that a catastrophic earthquake hit the region in the year 749 CE.
Okay.
And it leveled many structures across the Galilee. It is possible that early Christians, seeing their beloved church ruined by the earthquake, but wanting to fiercely protect the sacred site of Peter and Andrew's home from desecration or looting, they intentionally walled up the entrances with stone.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they essentially buried it themselves to keep the mosaics and the holy ground safe, perhaps hoping to return and rebuild one day.
Whichever theory is correct, the result is that the site was preserved beautifully. And that preservation led to the absolute pinnacle of this discovery, which was announced in a major press release in August of 2022. They found the identifying inscription. Can you break down the details of that mosaic?
I'd love to. So, during the excavation of the sacristy of the church, which is the side room where sacred vessels and vestments are kept, they uncovered a large, intricate Greek inscription.
In Greek?
Yes. It was framed within a round medallion made of 2 lines of black tesserae. Tesserae, for those who don't know, are the small, individual, hand-cut blocks of stone or glass used to form a mosaic.
Right.
The Greek text mentions a financial donor named Constantine, the servant of Christ, who likely funded the creation of the mosaic floor. But the crucial part of the text is what follows. It features a direct, formal petition for intercession directed specifically to St. Peter.
Okay.
And it uniquely refers to Peter using a very specific, highly exalted Byzantine title, the Chief and Commander of the Heavenly Apostles.
Chief and Commander of the Heavenly Apostles. That is incredibly specific phrasing.
It is. It acts much like the cornerstone of a modern building that explicitly names the architect and the building's purpose. As Dr. Stephen Notley, the academic director of the dig, stated, this discovery is the strongest indicator yet that Peter had a special, localized association with this specific basilica.
It wasn't just a generic church.
Exactly. The Byzantine Christians didn't just throw a title like Chief and Commander around randomly on any floor. They placed it here, in this specific room, because this was the site historically remembered and venerated as his actual home. It perfectly corroborates Willibald's travelogue and ties the Byzantine veneration directly to the Roman-era fishing village buried beneath it.
And the stratigraphic roots go even deeper than the Byzantine era, don't they? The archaeology at El-Araj continues to push the timeline further back.
It does. The site continues to yield surprises. Beneath the mosaic floors of the Byzantine Church of the Apostles, excavators have now uncovered the remains of a large 4th century sacred structure.
4th century, that's very early.
Very early. This pushes the formal veneration of the site even closer to the time of Jesus. It aligns perfectly with the writings of a 4th century historical figure named Epiphanius. He recorded a fascinating account about a man named Joseph of Tiberias.
Who was he?
He was a Jewish convert to Christianity who explicitly sought and received permission from the Roman Emperor Constantine to build the very first churches in Jewish towns in the Galilee, specifically mentioning places like Capernaum and Tiberias.
So we are looking at an unbroken chain of historical memory. You start at the bottom with the first-century Roman fishing village of Julius, complete with Herod Philip's coins. Built directly over that, you have a 4th-century sacred structure built by the earliest formalized Christian communities under Constantine.
Right.
And built directly over that, you have the magnificent Byzantine basilica with the mosaic inscription dedicating the site to Peter. It is a straight vertical line of historical continuity right through the soil.
It is the absolute ideal scenario for an archaeologist. It proves that the site wasn't just randomly chosen centuries later by medieval pilgrims guessing at locations. There was a continuous, unbroken chain of local memory and physical veneration right down to the 1st-century bedrock where the fishermen actually lived, repaired their nets, and processed their catch.
Okay, taking a step back from just Bethsaida, we need to look at the entire region we've discussed today. When we synthesize all of these discoveries, from the massive harbors at Capernaum to the limnology of the lake to the unearthing of El-Araj, what does this tapestry of evidence mean for how we understand the texts?
It creates an undeniable, interlocking physical record across the entire Galilee. You cannot look at these sites in isolation. They are deeply connected.
Right.
Take Capernaum, as we mentioned earlier regarding the promenade. Excavators didn't just find a beautiful 3rd-century white limestone synagogue. When they dug beneath that white limestone, they found the 1st-century black basalt foundations of the original synagogue, the exact building where Jesus is recorded as preaching.
Right under the newer one.
Yes. And just 85 feet away from those basalt foundations, they found an octagonal 5th-century church. When they dug beneath the center of that octagon, they found the 1st-century domestic house of Peter's in-laws, complete with 1st-century plaster walls covered in graffiti mentioning Peter and Jesus.
Wow. The same pattern emerges if you cross the lake to the eastern shore, too, to a place called Kursi.
Kursi, right. Kursi is situated in what was Gentile territory of the 1st century, known as the land of the Gerasenes or Gadarenes. This is the exact location where the Gospels record the miracle of the swine, where the herd runs violently down a steep bank into the sea.
And what do we find there?
Archaeologists uncovered the 2nd-largest Byzantine monastery in all of Israel, built right at the precise topographical spot that perfectly matches the biblical description of the steep bank dropping into the water. The early Christians knew the geography, and they marked the exact spot with massive architecture.
The sheer volume of physical data forces a conclusion.
Yeah.
I mean, why spend an hour talking about the texture of basalt foundations, the mechanics of lead fishing weights, the physics of thermal stratification, and the architectural puzzles of missing doors?
Right, why does it matter?
It all points to one reality. The Christian faith, and the biblical text that outlines it, is not a mythology untethered from reality. It is not a fairy tale that happens once upon a time in a land far, far away.
Absolutely not.
The Gospels accurately, meticulously preserve the geopolitical, economic, and geographic facts of 1st-century Galilee. The authors knew about the massive, bustling ports. They understood the sudden, violent windstorms that triggered the upwellings.
Yes.
They knew exactly where the steep banks were located on the eastern shore. They knew Bethsaida was a thriving fishing hub situated right on the water's edge, not a mile inland.
The text is utterly grounded in the physical reality of the region. Physical dirt, the limestone, the lead weights, the Greek tesserae, they all act as undeniable, tangible witnesses to the historical reliability of the text. As you noted at the very beginning of our deep dive, the stones are indeed crying out.
They are crying out from the depths of the lake and from beneath the ruins of the sugar factories. And that brings us to the end of our journey today, to a moment we call the Selah moment. Selah is an ancient Hebrew word often found in the songs, indicating a time to pause, to breathe, and to reflect on what all this ancient dirt and stone means for us today. I want to speak directly to you, the listener. We've spent the last hour looking at the heavy lead weights, the stone anchors, and the massive 2,500-foot commercial harbors that made up the Galilean fishing economy. We've seen how deeply entrenched Peter, Andrew, James, and John were in the physical reality of their world. They weren't aimless vagabonds looking for a distraction. They were businessmen tethered to a lucrative international export machine that stretched all the way to Rome.
Which forces us to pause and really reflect on the immense psychological weight of what it actually meant for these men to leave those nets. When they heard the call, they were walking away from the safety of those 16 ports. They were walking away from the security of their family businesses in Bethsaida, from the stability of the salted fish trade in Magdala.
Everything they knew.
They left a massive, secure, predictable infrastructure to follow a teacher into the complete unknown.
And so the question for you is this. What are the nets you are mending today? What are the heavy stone anchors keeping you tethered to the shore? We all have our own versions of that 2,500-foot promenade. The careers, the comforts, the identities, the financial security we have painstakingly built to ensure we feel safe in this world.
Yeah.
But following the truth in the covenant land, whether in the first century or right now, means being willing to step out of the boat. It means leaving the absolute security of the known, even when the waters are deep and the winds are howling.
It requires a profound, anchoring trust that the one calling you out onto the water holds the winds and the waves in his hands, the very winds that churn the depths of the Kinneret to bring the fish to the surface.
I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over, returning to the dirt of El-Araj. For 2,000 years, the true house of the fishermen lay buried. It was hidden beneath catastrophic earthquakes, buried under the mundane packed dirt of medieval sugar factories, and lost in the shifting mud of the Jordan River. It was completely obscured from the world, written off by many as a myth or a geographical error.
Right.
But the foundation was always there, waiting in the dark for the exact right moment to be brought back into the light. What hidden foundations in your own life is the truth, patiently waiting to uncover? Thank you for walking this path with us today.
Map is folded on the sea. The sky is turning gray. I'm looking for a signpost in the middle of the day. I've got 1,000 questions and a heart that's prone to stray, but I can hear a whisper telling me the way. It's a light upon the pavement, it's a hand upon the wheel, giving me the courage and the strength I need to feel. 'Cause he leads the blind by paths they haven't known. In the desert and the valley I am never on my own. He turns the darkness into light right before my very eyes. He's a steady north star in the middle of the skies. I don't have to see the ending to know that he is there. Every mile is a blessing, every breath is like a prayer. Yeah. In the dust of ancient places, in the wind across the plain, I see the mercy falling like a soft and summer rain. I've walked some crooked roads and I've climbed some heavy hills, but I'm learning how to listen when the world is standing still. It ain't about the speed or how far I've gotta go. It's about the one who's leading through the high and through the low. He makes the rough places smooth and the crooked paths straight. I'm leaving all my worries at the golden morning gate. 'Cause he leads the blind by paths they haven't known. In the desert and the valley I'm never on my own. He turns the darkness into light right before my very eyes. He's a steady north star in the middle of the skies. I don't have to see the ending to know that he is there. Every mile is a blessing, every breath is like a prayer.